Donald Glover's finally getting his Spider-Man movie. It's just not exactly in the way you think. According to sources, Glover's all set to star in and produce a feature in Sony Pictures' Spider-Man universe of Marvel Comics characters. Miles Murphy, the son of actor and comedian Eddie Murphy, will be writing the project, which is believed to focus on the Hypno Hustler, one of the more obscure Spider-Man bad guys. Here's everything we know so far. First up, fans have been wanting Donald Glover to play Miles Morales in a live-action Spider-Man film for ages. Glover's someone with a storied Spider history, from the fan campaign to have him cast as Miles Morales, to his brief appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming as Aaron Davis. Back when The Amazing Spider-Man was in the works, fans even tried to get him chosen for the role that ultimately went to Andrew Garfield. Glover's days of playing a live-action teenager may be over, but when it comes to age-appropriate casting for animated features, Glover's still very capable of childlike vocal exuberance. And that's what made him so great for that role in the animated series on Disney XD, The Ultimate Spider-Man. Even though he eventually ended up voicing the character in an animated series, he hasn't ever shown up on screen to play the superhero. Moving on, the latest Spidey project Glover has been attached to doesn't have a title yet, but is said to revolve around the Hypno Hustler. Hypno Hustler may not be one of the web-slinging hero's most well-known nemesis, but according to sources, Glover was drawn to the musical aspect of the character, as well as the fact that he has less Marvel canon baggage, which frees him to broader interpretations. So Glover was ultimately attracted to the project because it could be anything from a disco period piece to a reimagined modern hip-hop version, or even a cyberpunk future play. According to that spark was Murphy's take on the character and story, the details of which are being kept very hushed up. So who exactly is Hypno Hustler? Created by Bill Mantlo, the writer also responsible for creating Rocket Raccoon, and artist Frank Springer, Hypno Hustler was a product of the disco music scene when he first made his appearance in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 4, all the way back in 1978. This was when Saturday Night Fever had taken the world by storm, and everyone from Mickey Mouse to Count Chocula was coming out with a disco album. Obviously, Marvel wanted in on the action, and that's how the disco-themed villain Hypno Hustler was born. The villain's real name is Antoine Del Swan, the leader of a band called the Mercy Killers, and he was depicted as a villain who used hypnosis tech in his instruments to hypnotize his audience and then rob them. Along with the guitar that emitted hypnotic sound waves, he even had a pair of boots that spewed out knockout gas, as well as retractable knives in the soles. When he first encountered Spider-Man, Del Swan was performing at a nightclub with his band, when he was caught by the club owner stealing from the safe. Antoine used his equipment to hypnotize the manager, after which the band hypnotized the audience and stole from them. Peter Parker was at the club with some friends and rushed to change into his Spidey costume when he saw what was happening. While fighting the band, he discovered that Hypno Hustler's headphones protected him from his own music. So he removed his headphones, causing him to become hypnotized along with everyone else in the club. Once the audience was free of the hypnosis, Spider-Man left the villain and his band all webbed up and trapped for the police to find. Onto Glover's take on the villain has the potential to be great, but the original villain from the comics wasn't exactly an A-list Spider-Man rogue. After his first encounter with Spider-Man, Hypno Hustler didn't exactly become one of Spidey's recurring villains. Within just a year of his introduction, the disco bubble burst, and everything related to the fad began to die out. And thus, the Hypno Hustler, with all his silver everything and afro hairdo glory, became an instant relic of a pop culture phase gone by. He's appeared a couple of times in the year since he first appeared, but it's usually been as a background character cameo, standing in as the butt of some joke. The last time we saw him, he was at a Villanon meeting for reformed villains. We imagine that Donald Glover's going to have a lot of fun with a character like Hypno Hustler, especially if he decides to turn the entire project into an homage of the excess of the disco era. It could be super interesting to see Glover playing the Hustler, especially given his links to music and comedy. And again, since this villain isn't very well known, Glover and company have the freedom to take the character in whatever direction they want. The possibilities are endless. But what will happen to Glover's MCU role now? Remember how we mentioned that Glover briefly showed up as Aaron Davis, Miles' uncle, in Spider-Man Homecoming? Yeah, you may have missed that since it was a deleted scene, but his role as Davis was confirmed through that scene. In Marvel Comics, Davis is the supervillain known as the Prowler in the Ultimate Universe, as seen in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Later, when the Ultimate Universe was introduced to the main Marvel Universe, Davis was recast as a villainous version of the Iron Spider. With Glover showing up as Miles' uncle, fans hoped that the series story would continue to move towards Miles' debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. universe. But his absence from Far and Home called those assumptions into question. When questioned, writers Chris McKenna and Eric Summers said that they wanted to bring him back, but moving the filming to Europe made that kind of difficult to justify. So we're really hoping that Davis being absent from Far From Home doesn't mean he won't return at some point in the future, and that Miles won't debut at some point as well. What we don't have high hopes for anymore is seeing Glover return as Davis. Now, let's talk about why Sony's historic move with the Hypno Hustler could dampen fans' hopes of seeing Glover return to the MCU as Davis. Since Glover has taken up this latest project involving the Hypno Hustler, Davis's role might just have to be recast. While this is unfortunate, Glover's producing credit in the Hypno Hustler movie from Sony suggests that he's passionate about the project, which means we wouldn't be surprised if he chooses it over his MCU commitment. We don't know whether the planned Hypno Hustler movie is going to be connected to the larger universe where Venom and Morbius live, but based on a report, this could be less likely since Glover's currently leaning more towards greater interpretations outside of Marvel canon baggage. That being said, Glover's freedom combined with Miles Murphy's take allows the Hypno Hustler to stand out and possibly become what saves Sony's Marvel universe. Here's how that could happen. Again, even though Hypno Hustler is typically ranked as one of the worst comic book villains because of his super outdated personality, a movie revolving around him doesn't necessarily have to be set in the 70s. The film could be depicted as a modern multiversal musical adventure of sorts, a period piece that evolves into a newer setting, or any other storytelling methods that Sony's Spider-Man universe has used before. Because the upcoming Madame Web solo movie is going to be set in the 2000s, a period setting for Hypno Hustler could actually work pretty well, with a retro aesthetic kind of like MCU's Captain Marvel. What's important to remember, though, is that if the disco villain faces Tom Holland's Spider-Man at any point, he would have to be brought into the MCU's current time period, and that's not something that would be too far-fetched, considering how Sony's Spider-Man villain franchise has been bringing other obscure characters like El Muerto into the fold. Back to Glover. This isn't the first time Glover's had a role in the Spider-Man franchise. The singer-actor grew up with Spider-Man as his #1 superhero, and even though he hasn't gotten the chance to wear web shooters or red and blue tights yet, he's had the honor of voicing a precocious version of Marvel Comics' Wallcrawler. Like we mentioned before, Glover played Miles Morales in Disney XD's animated series, Ultimate Spider-Man: Web Warriors, which took Peter Parker through various parallel worlds. One of these worlds was home to Miles Morales, Peter's half-Hispanic, half-black counterpart, voiced by Glover. We've seen Miles in Into the Spider-Verse and the PlayStation games, but most people may not have seen this version of him voiced by none other than Glover. It all started in 2011 when Miles was introduced to comic book readers in Marvel Comics' Ultimate Spider-Man series by Brian Michael Bendis, after the writer came across Glover's Twitter campaign to play Spider-Man in a live-action movie. And that's how the cartoon Miles was born. Cartoon Miles is very close to the comic book version. The 13-year-old is still getting used to being a superhero when he meets his dimension-hopping counterpart, played by Drake Bell, who's trying to stop his old nemesis, the Green Goblin, from collecting the DNA of various Spider-Men for nefarious reasons. It's a pretty emotional moment for Miles, because in his world, Peter is dead, so he's essentially meeting someone who's his hero, much like Spider-Man is Donald Glover's. So that's probably why the sentiment comes across so beautifully in Glover's performance. According to Stephen Wacker, a former Spider-Man editor, he's got real warmth. If you read Miles Morales comics, Donald's voice nails what you've been reading. So maybe it's true, Spider-Man really can be anybody. Glover says that's exactly why he tried to be as much of himself as possible when he was voicing Miles, because you're always just going to bring it back to yourself when you watch the show. He says that kids would regularly come up to him at his Childish Gambino concerts asking him to sign their Miles Morales comics. And he also says that he can completely relate to them because of how big of a Spider-Man fan he himself has been from way back. That's a wrap for this video. Do you want to see Donald Glover return as Miles' uncle? Or would you rather see him play Hypno Hustler? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.